Hello, good evening, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another week and with it another fantastic Friday evening of iRacing GTE Sprint Series racing action. Of course, the official series brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. It is week number 3 of the 2025 Season 2 Championship campaign. We have made our way from the United States of America and the wonderful Daytona circuit only a week ago to Japan. Across the Pacific, we have roared our way, that wonderful ocean, and we have made our way to the infamous Suzuka International Racing Course. Iconic perhaps due to its figure of 8 layout designed by John Hugenholt and many an era ago, it is a circuit that has withstood the test of time. Being officially a test circuit for the Honda Motoring Company, it is a circuit that has reached not just the domestic stage of Japan, but also the international stage with its ability to bring together such an eclectic mix of corners, and with it there's no simple way to defeat Suzuka. With 4 sectors, the first 2 of which are all about medium to low speed corners, and as the lap goes onwards, you find that the average lap speed in terms of its corner apexes starts to increase little by little, and also the length of the straights get longer and longer as well as you make your way all the way around towards the conclusion. Well, to get things right at Suzuka, it comes just as much down towards the driver as it does their command of their chosen GT machine. But where are my manners? We welcome you all to this live broadcast from Circuit Side, available only on YouTube at the YouTube channel of TX141TX or T Paul Walsh, depending on which name you search for. But either one you search for, welcome to you guys and girls that are tuning in this evening. And we do say hello there in particular to Simon B or Simon Bamba, who's going to be racing in this top split broadcast for the first time. Because this is, of course, what is 1900 GMT, that's Greenwich Mean Time, or Universal Coordinate Time UTC, top split brought to you every Friday where we possibly can. And, well, let's come into our schedule for this evening then. And as we can see, we're only approximately 4 minutes away from our one race, which is due to get underway at 7:10 this evening in GMT or UTC. 45 minutes of racing action around the Suzuka circuit. It's going to be fast, it's going to be furious, it's going to be intense, and all your racing action is going to be brought to you by myself. My name in your commentary booth is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain Aspect, depending on what media you follow me on. But if enough about me, let's give you a recap of the schedule so far and what we've still got lying in wait, and we've got tons to come as we do look back to the schedule. And of course, today it's Friday the 4th of April. In week number 1, we're in Belgium for the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. In week number 2, last time out, we're in America for the Daytona International Speedway, and today it's the Suzuka International Racing Course that plays host with its Grand Prix layout in particular, welcoming our drivers. But after today, we'll be making our way to Italy for the Autodromo Nacional Monza for week number 4. And it will be our first Wednesday night top split broadcast due to scheduling conflicts. But trust me, as long as we can, there will be a top split broadcast of what will be our 1900 GMT slot every week. We may just be alternated between Fridays and Wednesdays, and we'll remind you about that again at the end of today's broadcast. But still plenty of weeks of racing to come and plenty of circuits as well. But let's not dwell on the calendar. Let's draw a little bit more on our host circuit. Well, of course, it is the Grand Prix layout of the Suzuka circuit, located in the region of Suzuka City in the Mie Prefecture of the Kansai region of Japan. And thank you to iRacing.com, not just for what is their brilliant simulator, and not just for the official GT Sprint Series, but also the wonderful track mats that come as part of the simulator, spanning the best part of 17 corners, many of them with household names, including what is the Casio Triangle at chicane to complete lap at turns 15 through to 17, or the legendary 130R at turn number 14. There's something for everybody here, and many of these corners are enshrined in motorsporting history. And as you can see, at the first half of lap, running all the way from the start-finish straight up to what is turn number 9 or Degna 2, is all about the command of medium speed apex in direction change. Whereas being on the second half of the lap, from where's the Kobayashi hairpin at turn number 11 all the way through to the Casio Triangle chicane, it's a little bit of a faster section of the lap, but it's also all about very sudden movements under braking or with the car. But as we come from our circuit to our rules, which we go racing with, it's an open setup series with fuel loads restricted to 50%. The grid shall be set via a closed qualifying session, which is currently ongoing and coming to a close. The race shall commence via a rolling start as is a tradition of the GT Sprint Series, with drivers receiving a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 16 or more instant points, and if they get up to 25, it'll be automatic disqualification. But enough about that, and coming to here and now, because we don't want rules and regulations, we're here for the racing, and as we do see our drivers making their way around in this qualifying session, a strength of field this evening in the region of 2,859, if my memory serves me correctly, or round up to 2.9k there in the top left-hand corner of your screen above the timing tower, and we've got plenty of new names on this top split grid today, including you're seeing one right now, and the number 3 driver, but the fastest man out there right now in terms of qualifying pace, And looking to try and go for a provisional pole, it's none other than Felix Gauchel as he makes his way on towards what will be the Casio Triangle chicane in the Porsche 911 RSR. And it really was a day of the Porsche GTE Cup last time out at Daytona. The majority of the field being made up of Porsche drivers, but today we've got a bit more of an even split between Porsches and Corvettes. And we've also got car variety out there, no doubt about it, as we do see there Gauchel making his way across that timeline, does not improve. But meanwhile, we also look to Simon Bamber running in the Corvette C8R GTE, and as he does so, yet to get a lap on the board. He's saving it all for a single lap. Remember, they only get 2 flying laps within that 8-minute window. You must set your laps before the 8-minute strikes the clock. If you don't, then you'll immediately be taken back to the pit lane and you won't have set a lap time. We take your best possible lap within the 8 minutes over the course of 2 laps, and that is going to be where you qualify. And as Bamber crosses the line, what's he going to be able to achieve here, if anything? And the answer is it's an invalidated lap, and Bamber does not set a valid time. But what about Carlo Panzoldi meanwhile? And Panzoldi has been on the grid a couple of times in the past, bringing the BMW M8 GT there with its absolutely huge front grille, and the only one of our GTs, of course, which is front engine rear wheel drive. Meanwhile, all of the others are mid engine rear wheel drive, including the Porsche, and we say it every week, but it does go against the normal grain of Porsche 911s being rear engine rear wheel drive, and the fact the engine is located in the midsection behind the driver and not over the rear axle. But as we do see the wonderful 4.4 litre V8 twin turbo machine from Germany making its way on through in the hands of Panzoldi, we're coming in towards what we spoon and out of it there, absolutely nailing those apexes. Lovely run, a little bit of oversteer there on the exit, the second part of Spoon, but he collects the car back together just about as he now makes his way upwards the more domestic start-finish straight there for one of the shorter versions of the course. Of course, there are 3 major layouts to the Suzuka circuit. The Grand Prix layout, which we're running on, and you also do have the east and the west sections, which see the circuit split in half and all making use of the wonderful corner combinations out there as he makes his way through turns 15, 16 and 17. Through Casio Triangle he goes, and what can Panzoldi do here? Will he get to the timeline? In fact, I don't know if he's going to. He's going to be very close here. 2, 1 left on the clock, and he just gets across that line. And will it be a valid time? It puts him P13. It's a good lap there, but it's Gauchel who takes pole position. And let's make our way to the grid then, ladies and gentlemen, and make our way into today's race. But how do they line up, I hear you ask? Well, here we go. It is none other than what is Felix Gauchel, who starts on pole position. Behind him on what is the front row as well, it'll be Samuel Lorenzo, the number 1 driver here. And keep your eyes out for the Spaniard, who'll be in the Corvette C8R. You then got Daniel Cruz and Balta Fernandez line up on row number 2. They'll do battle there in their own Corvettes. And then we do have our next driver in a Porsche 911, and that is going to be none other than Jeroen Vadlet, as we will see the Belgian driver there have to go toe-to-toe with Javi Afonso Moreno, who starts P6. We'll then have P7, a regular Gustavo Colucci, the Argentine, being joined there by Matty Chambers for Evo SR Green. I do believe that's the first time we've seen Chambers on the grid as well, and welcome to him in the number 9. And then we'll have completing the top 10 Marcello Hernan and what is there Cedric Boisier, the Ford GT driver representing the American brand once again. And it's never an interesting day, or not quite as interesting as it can be when you don't have Cedric Boisier there, and it's great to see him back once again in the number 8. Behind the Cube Racing driver, meanwhile starting on what is your 6th row of the grid, it'll be the combination of Jose Amaro and what is there Carsi Sadell. And then we do have behind them Carlo Panzoldi with that last-minute lap starting P13, the BMW M8, and then we'll have in his company Joop Bevers, and Bevers will be starting from the Benelux region there on what is your 7th row of the grid. P15 is going to be the combination of Martin Novak and Daniel Marotto, and then from them to what is P17, Simon Bamber for Effect Simulations, who didn't get a lap time on the board, and he'll be the first of the drivers who wasn't to get a lap time on the board. He'll be joined by Nick O'Neill. The 2 Britons line up on row at number 9. Your top 10 rows, I should say, your top 20 is completed by the combination of Daniel Zink and what is there Oleg Poilov, and then starting last but not least in what will be P21 will be none other than Enrico Grand, and it'll be a difficult day at the office there for what is the Oceano region driver, but you can imagine starting from the back of the field has its own benefits, and sometimes those benefits are simply you get to see all the danger in front of you and you can perhaps dodge it as you get ready to go racing on the opening lap. But as I try to begin to get themselves underway, this partial formation lap, it starts just before they make their way into Spoon Corner, and as they make their way on through behind the iRacing automated safety car, well, they have to maintain a low level of speed for some time, but once they do get up to speed, the racing will be absolutely furious from that point onwards. And as they head on through, well, we do see there what it is, a message from Simon B in what is the YouTube chat saying that there was a bit of an issue with regards to his internet, and that's why his lap time was not recorded. So therefore, it's going to be a last to first change, but we always love to see those, and we've seen a couple of those in what is previous seasons of the GTEs in the top splits. But as we come back to the here and now, and our tries gradually make the way forward, will we ride on board with the Ferrari 488 of Joep Bivers as he makes his way along here. One of only two Ferraris staying. They line up together practically, or in the same region. Daniel Morato just being behind him in the other Ferrari. In fact, I do believe we have got all 5 of what is our GTs represented here, which is always great to see. But with that in mind, and well, we are only now what is a couple of quarters away from going green flag racing. Well, looking from the mid-pack to what is your front row of the grid, albeit starting P2, Samuel Lorenzo. He won't be able to dictate the pace. It'll be to Grishel to do that instead. But you can imagine when they do go racing, well, Lorenzo's going to look to attack immediately. But to Felix Grishel, it's going to be time to get us rolling here at Suzuka. As he makes his way out Casio Triangle, he doesn't flinch, or does he? No, he decides to go, and Grishel there catches the field out as they make their way out of Casio Triangle and onto the open lap. It's green as they roar their way down towards turn number 1, and as they do, you can see already the way the field has split and segued through the Casio Triangle chicane. 3 wide further back, that's Daniel Cruz going in. They're going to get very close here, and they survive it all immediately. That leg goes around the outside. In the end, a car off wide there, one driver going a bit wide. I believe that was Matty Chambers having a big slide. Carlo Panzoldi trying to battle with him further back and getting the head off camera, but meanwhile Daniel Cruz holding on there just about as they come over the crest and now down into turn number 6. But immediately you'll start to see now everyone will calm down a little bit as further back Nick O'Neill has had a reasonable start, holding on to P18, tucked in by the fellow BMW M8 driver Martin Novak. These two trying to make a little bit of progress here, but not quite able to do so far. Meanwhile, Matty Chambers with that big slide that we did see through turns 1 and 2. Well, right now he's got Carly Sadell right behind, and then it's going to be the 2 Ferraris trying to hug the back of him as well, with Morato looking for that pressure on what is Bivers as they make the way out to Degner 1 and Degner 2. But in towards the Kobayashi hairpin they go, named after Kamui Kobayashi, the famous Japanese Formula 1 driver, matching the best ever result achieved in a Formula 1 race by Japanese drivers. Meanwhile, Simon Bamba goes around the outside and finds all the grip where everyone's continuing together, but he's got to go so long around that Morato there is able to cover him up. A little bit of a love tap between the two of them. And I think Bamba had argued that essentially he was cut across the nose. You see Daniel Morato having a lot of trouble there. I do wonder whether there's potentially an issue with the car, because you did see it wobble slightly before the contact, and right now Morato really struggling as meanwhile Novak goes a little bit deep there through Spoon, but he gets it back together thereabouts. So easy to make a mistake at Spoon Curve, and going deep there is Daniel Zink, who's leaving a place to Puilov, and Puilov goes up into P19 as meanwhile Martin Novak powers his way on past Nick O'Neill as they make the way down the back stretch and in towards 130R. But as they head on through and the grass trimmings are being kicked up there, Simon Bamba battling side by side on the inside of Joep Bivers, moves up to P14, making some further progress. A big lock up there from Wes Bivers, and Joep Bivers goes straight on that Ferrari. The front right brake locks up, and in the end, to let it go, as otherwise it's only going to punish him more. But after one lap of racing, it is Felix Grishel who leads ahead of Samuel Lorenzo, then Balta Fernandez P3, Daniel Cruz P4, Duronen Vadled P5 ahead of Yabi Alfonso Moreno P6. Then we've got Gustavo Calici P7, Cedric Boyce at P8, the Sold Ford GT here, and making some good progress. 2 places gained since the start. Marcello Hernan P9, Jose Alvaro P10, and Carlo Panzoldi Besteres P11. He may have left it late in qualifying, but right now he's not waiting to gain places here, and we love to see it from Panzoldi. He's making some great progress. We have lost one driver already, and that was Grond, who unfortunately it does seem as though they couldn't get the car out of the pit lane to get it into the race, and that's a bit unfortunate there, but hopefully they are able to get that resolved for later what is split of this series. And meanwhile, as Panzoldi makes his way on through turn number 7, you can see Matty Chambers now starting to come back in a little bit after Chambers had that very difficult opening lap where everything seemed to slide away from him, not getting the tyre temperature, but right now settling back in as Bamba looking for another opportunity here, looking versus Sadell. He's going to look to the inside of 10, 2 wide there into the right, but it's the hairpin that'll make the difference. The Porsche's got the better brakes, but the Corvette we know is a very strong all-rounder, and Bamba tries to go all the way around the outside. He will now have a bit of an overspeed on the run, but he's covered off there into turn number 12, riding on the rear of where Sadell is now. Sadell gives the space as they head in towards Spoon Curve. He wants to cover the inside of Sadell. Bamba says, well, I'm going to go around the outside here. Onto the brakes they go, and Bamba, does he get it stopped in time? Yes, he does, and Simon Bamba moves up into P13. He's making lightning quick work of this field so far, but I can imagine as well he's got everything switched on nice and early, and he's on the attack. He'll be trying to chase down next Matty Chambers. Behind him, Oleg Puilov, meanwhile, is leading ahead of Johan Bevers, but he's chasing after Martin Novak in this freeway fight for P16, and this trio of drivers right now all close together, but it will be Novak who dictates the pace through 130R, or will it be as they make the way towards the braking zone here onto the anchors they go, and Boilov going defensive there versus Bevers, knowing that the Ferrari driver wants an opportunity to try and get that place back, and Novak in the end able to just breathe happily heading in towards Casio Triangle, but I think it's going to be only temporary because I would imagine that Boilov has got a little bit more pace in that M8 by comparison with his fellow BMW driver, as we see the flames there spit out the side of the car with the side exhaust ports, and down in towards turn number 1 they go once again, but it's going to be follow the leader for a brief while. It's very difficult to overtake in this opening sector of the lap unless you get a much better run out of a corner and you get along fully alongside, but the problem is there you're then going to lose a lot of time in battling side by side, but sometimes it's worth it, but not right now necessarily. Looking at back up there, we do see Carlo Panzoldi under increasing pressure from Matty Chambers as we ride back on board with the number, what is there, 19 driver, and Chambers by comparison number 9 driver. You'd imagine on paper, or at least in theory, because that's related to your I rating, the lower the number in terms of heading towards 1, or the higher the rating, you could almost say, with regards to your ranking number in terms of your door number, well, that represents your I rating compared to your PL. So the number 1 driver's got the highest I rating of them all, but there's a move from Bamber looking around the outside of what is Chambers, but Chambers absolutely slams the door firmly shut in Bamber's face and says, I've seen you doing this to the drivers behind, I'm not going to fall victim to it, thank you very much. And therefore Chambers now puts his foot down and simply says to Bamber, you're going to have to try something a bit different, I've seen that one too many times. So Bamber says, okay, I'll go to the inside of Spoon. He can't quite do it, he's not fully alongside. Bamber runs a little bit wide there, he'll get away with that so long as he doesn't put all 4 wheels up onto that curbing. That's where the AstroTurf can pull the car away very easily. There's very little grip on the outside of Spoon, and as I head down the back stretch here, well, right now Chambers really proves to be a little bit of a roadblock for Bamber in terms of his progress, but we love to see it because this is brilliant battling. Bamber's going to look to the inside here into 130R, but Chambers says, you can do that, it's not going to faze me, I'm not going to back out. And as they head in towards Casio Triangle, well, Bamber's going to have to get a little bit more inventive here, but I'm sure he's going to figure something out nice and early as we ride on board as they make the way now in towards another lap, right on board with the number 4 driver. 4 places gained since the start, but he's got more progress to make as they make the way onwards. We have had an instant for a driver further back, I believe, for Johan Bevers and Daniel Zink, but meanwhile, Bamber gets the overspeed here, it's turn 1 he goes, 2 wide they make the way into turn number 1, Bamber rides the curve there, and in the end he gets it stopped to the dime, and up in the P12 goes the Corvette driver. That's another place gain, but Chambers gave him a good fight, and I think for Matty Chambers right now, he'll try and tuck him behind the Corvette and see if he can come back in a bit later on. But what a move there from Bamber, really had to set that one up and work hard for it, and credit to Chambers, showing that he's not just there to make up the numbers, and indeed is there to put up an absolutely huge fight. But meanwhile, let's take a look back at some incidents that happened at the end of the previous lap, starting what happened to you at Bevers, and I think this may be interlinked with Daniel Zink. Was he made his way out 130R, a good run there, tried to go around the outside, a little bit a tap there by looks of things initially, and then in the end just carries too much speed into the Casio Triangle chicane, and the car goes round. Well, as he brings it back together, looks though there the rest of the field was able to avoid any chaos. Well, I think Daniel Zink might have gone absolutely flying on there. Let's see what happened from Daniel Zink's perspective, riding on board with the 7-Up machine. Into the braking zone he goes, let's listen in. And just a big lock up there for Daniel Zink, so that explains what happened, and then deciding, interestingly, to take what is the alternative chicane route there. Many drivers will just drive across the gravel or the grass in order to rejoin, but not Daniel Zink, and credit to him for doing it the right way. But as he builds himself back up to speed, and we return to your live racing action, ladies and gentlemen, well, there's still plenty more to come here. We're only, what is 4 laps in, on 7.5 minutes. We've got 45 minutes of racing here, of course, and well, from towards the back of the field, let's look back up to the very front, because whilst Felix Gritschel may have got an absolutely brilliant start to this race, well, Samuel Lorenzo, Balta Fernandez and Daniel Cruz are all caught up to him since then, and now making their way on down towards turn number 1. I get the feeling that this could be a lot of pressure building, because Lorenzo is no slouch. We've seen Lorenzo in previous seasons put on some stellar performances, and I think today is going to be no exception as he looks around the outside of the Porsche driver, tries to put the pressure on, but in the end backs off, tries to see exactly how Gritschel is going to react, trying to give himself all the information he can, and that's one part when you've got a lot of race distance to go. It's just simply try and get into the mind of your rival, try and understand what they're going to do when you look here, when you look there. But of course the one downside to this, as we do look to what is the on-board here for Daniel Cruz, is in P4, is that he's chasing after Balta Fernandez, and Fernandez is not too far behind Lorenzo at the moment, so you can imagine if Lorenzo plays around too much with his target, then it would be the situation whereby Fernandez or Terti Cruz will both be thinking, okay, well, I might be able to look for an opportunity here as well, as they come through Degner 2, and the Corvette pursuing Army versus that Porsche right now. Well, the Corvette, we have seen in previous seasons, has been the strongest car on overall race pace at most circuits in terms of the fact it maintains its laps very strongly over the entire distance, and we're not expecting our drivers to change their tyres in the pit lane. The only thing we're expecting them to do is put in the splash and dash of fuel, which guarantees they'll get to the end of the race unscathed on fuel capacity. But you can imagine right now for Grishel, he's going to be thinking about trying to save all that fuel as much as possible, and well, if he can do so, he's going to give himself a little bit of advantage, but he's also got to save that tyre life as well. But tyre life comes at a premium. But looking back, Simon Bamber's gained another place, it would seem, as he's ahead now of Jose Amaro. And well, as he makes his way through Spoon Corner, we'll get a replay of that when we can, with regards to that move being made. But further back, we've also got the battle of the BMWs, as that is a very late breaking into Spoon Corner for Oleg Poilov. And I believe in the end missed this braking point by being too close to BMW in front. He will rejoin, does very well to be fair, just lets the car roll onwards and uses the runoff area and the momentum to carry him on around. But he won't want to make that mistake again, given the fact it's an easy one to make. But if you start to make it too many times, Spoon Corner can start to really catch out and get into your mind. But as we do say hello there to A. Garcia SR, and I hope you're doing well, good sir, and cheering on board to Fernandez out there, I do believe. Well, we've had a little bit of a moment further back as we've got a rejoin going on there, coming out of Casio Triangle, and that is for Carly Sirdell, and I believe Nick O'Neill might have also been involved in some sort of altercation. But hold the phone there, as another move's being made. This is Bamber on the inside of Hernan, and Hernan there relinquishing what is P9 to Bamber, and Bamber continues to make his way up the order. Of course, he is doing a bit of a last to first changes, Bamber, or at least trying to get in as many places as possible with no valid lap set in qualifying, but we do know he had a lot of pace out there and to potentially be able to deliver the goods. So right now for Bamber, I think he'll be feared as though it's an enjoyable race so far, but now comes a little bit of peace and quiet because he's got 2.5 seconds to Cedric Boissier, who's up the road. There's the Ford GT driver, the one Ford that we do have on the grid today, and well, Boissier is not very easy to pass in this Ford GT. We have seen in recent weeks, and the fact that this Ford GT driver, he does have a lot of racing spirit behind him for Cube Racing, and he will find a way to make it very difficult if he desires to. But of course, he's a very smart driver as well. He does remind me a little bit of a GT version of Alain Prost in the fact that he will pick the right battle at the right time in order to maximise his results over the course of the full race distance. As he powers his way on through, we take a look back at what exactly happened to Nick O'Neill and Carly Sirdell on the previous lap, and this is Nick O'Neill firstly. I suspect he is going to use a bit too much grass there on 130R, so runs out wide, runs even wider there, coming through the corner, or keeps it together just about, and almost onto the grass down to break into Casio Triangle, so that was a little bit of a hair raiser. Meanwhile for Carly Sirdell, what happened here for Sirdell, I think this was into Casio Triangle, just a bit further up the road from O'Neill at the time. Oh my goodness, and big snap under brake in there, and I think the number 11 driver, he came in absolutely roaring hot behind what was, I believe that was Carlo Panzoldi, who then had to take evasive action respectively, but I believe Sirdell being caught out by the BMW driver just braking a little bit earlier than he expected, and that can happen particularly with different skill levels between drivers and different choices of machinery, and some drivers a bit more braver on the brakes than others. But looking at back to your live pictures, well, we come back to the front of the field, and well, and good timing as well, as this top four is separated right now by only what is a second in its entirety. Would you believe it? That's right, you can see it then in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. Well, 1.1 seconds there if I correct myself very quickly, but they were separated by only a second when they made their way down the start for this straight. And right now Grishel, also what is Lorenzo Fernandez and Cruz all together, and I believe I might be saying Felix Gretschel's name wrong. It's Gretschel, not Grishel, and I do apologise for that. Let's get that corrected going forward. But as he makes the way out of turn number 7 and onwards towards 8 to 9 into Degner's. Well, right now for Felix Gretschel, he's just keeping his head down, and the 3 Corvettes behind him, I think, are all now starting to enter the phase of, do we fight or do we just simply save fuel and look to make the leapfrog in the pits? Well, I think it might be the latter rather than the former, as we do see Cedric Boyce, who's actually been going quite slowly after being passed by Simon Bamber on the run through the S sequence. We'll see if we can get a replay of that. Boyce under pressure, Marcello Hernan, Jose Amaro, and also Chambers, as they've all caught up. And we're looking back to Matty Chambers here as we ride on board where the Porsche 911 driver decides to go a little bit deep. This will go for the cutback run. He essentially V-shapes the hairpin rather than the more traditional U-shape, and as he comes out the corner, well, the Porsche absolutely roars with 6-cylinder engine making their way over the crest and down through turn number 12. The problem is for the what is the number 9 driver here. In fact, he's in a closely knit pack, and right now, given what happened on the opening lap, he won't have as much tyre life available to him with those big slides in the warming phase of the tyre on the opening lap. And that is where the tyre is most vulnerable, and you could take a lot of life out of it before you've even had the chance to really use it. And Chambers right now will be battling against the Tide, which is he does have a little bit of higher tyre wear compared to some of his rivals in front, and therefore he can't use the compound as much as he would like. And heading in towards 130R. The one nice thing about this situation is he does have a little bit of tactical flexibility. He can fuel save in the meantime. He can also think about pitting sooner rather than his rivals. And we normally do see the pit stops open up around the 17 to 18 minute mark, depending on the circuit, and they can run all the way to what would be around the 30th through to the 36th minute. And again, it all comes down to that fuel consumption on a circuit by circuit basis. But it means that Chambers does have a big window in which to look at a strategic overtake rather than what is an on-track overtake if desired. We're coming into one, or drivers there staying in line of stern formation for now, and as they come down we look back to Daniel Morotto there, the orange and white Ferrari 488 that's chasing after Carly Surdale. And this Ferrari right now, despite a big wobble at the start coming out of what was turns 11 and 12, we did see the car wobbling a little bit in its battle with Simon Bamber, and I think there might have been a slight technical issue with the car, perhaps trying to get something dialed in, as well as a little bit of a love tap with the Corvette driver. But right now Morotto does seem to have calmed himself down a little bit and got himself into the flow, and it's great to see. Always great to see the Italian brand being represented by a number 18 driver, and as he comes out of turn number 7, we'll try and chase down at what is Surdale. This time Surdale is starting to pull away just a little bit more, and I can imagine that therefore it's going to be a case whereby you just want to keep drilling in the laps. And a car that normally has a challenging consistency, the Ferrari, a very fast car at certain circuits, but on the whole very fast over a single lap, but it's also got a very particular tyre window, and as soon as you step out of that window, the lap times completely disintegrate. And we've seen that in the past from some of our Ferrari drivers, and that's going to be what Morotto is going to have to work on here today. And the Suzuka circuit, not an easy one to keep within a defined window when it comes to tyre life. But looking up to a Corvette driver here under big pressure, that is a big run of momentum for Chambers. We're looking at Amaro here in the Corvette C8R, the number 17, right on board and looking back here. And well, he is in this four-way fight for P9 with Boycia, Hernan himself and Chambers. But Chambers staying close, but not close enough to think about a move here. You can see on the straight, Chambers has got all the setup here for the corners. You can notice the gap that opens in that triple draft versus the double turbo Amaro. But meanwhile, under braking and in the medium and low speed corners, what is absolutely looking glued on. As hold up a second, I think we've got a parcel going here, and that is a very slow moving number 13, Marcello Hernan. And as they come out of turns 16 and 17, Chambers follows through. We're going to have to get a replay of that for the exterior cameras, but that was a surprise. I think there was a lock up there for what was Hernan as he went on down, but here comes the fight, and it's going to be Hernan to the inside here versus Chambers. They head into the braking zone for turn 1, but in the end, Chambers goes the speed, but too much of the rear lets go on that outside line, and Chambers falls victim to the same error that we saw on the open lap for him, which is the rear of the car just does not like going deep into turn 1, and as a result just came around and he rejoins right with Carly Surdale, who now reignites their battle from the open laps once again. So Chambers down to P13. And in the end, just being caught out on the high and wide line in towards turn number 1. Don't look as though there's contact between himself and Marcello Hernan, but Chambers is able to get clear of what is Surdale quickly, and will now have to chase after Carlo Panzoldi once again. And well, he'll be kicking himself, knowing he's got even more work to do. But let's take a look back at how that all played out, and in particular, how Marcello Hernan ended up falling into that fight. So this was coming out of what was turn number 13 and into 14, 15, 16. He went into Casio Triangle. Hernan just locks up on the front right brake. You can see he goes deep and then lets off the brake slightly in order to save that front right tyre. But in doing so, loses all his momentum. He manages to stay on circuit, well held to him. And then in the subsequent slipstream battle here, we'll look at the speed that Hernan picks up in the draft here. That goes to show you where Chambers has really set that Porsche up for the corners, and into the braking zone they went. Hernan on the inside and a little bit wobble there. You can see the car actually came loose for Chambers under braking there into turn number 1, or at least coming off throttle. So therefore I think Chambers has got a very unstable setup on that car, and that is a worry for Chambers in the fact that if he's not on the optimum racing line, it does seem to be a car that just walks away from him. But returning to your live racing pictures, well, from the battling outside the top 10 to the battling right at the front of the field, well, this is Christian, what is our race leader, holding that inside line, switch one way, switch the other, and Samuel Lorenzo there trying to throw the dummy, almost making it work, but Gretschel in the end holding on. And right now for Felix Gretschel, it is all about literally keeping that gap alive as much as he can, and Lorenzo is absolutely breathing down his neck. He's like a fire-breathing dragon right now, and the intensity of that heat is only getting higher from lap to lap, and that's going to make our Porsche leader feel that he's got to try and figure out something here. Can he figure it out on strategy? Can he figure it out on just holding the circuit lead in terms of track position? Well, he's at a bit of a loss here in the fact that whilst he is the race leader, and in theory, he can be the first to pit if he so desires. The problem is with how closely knit the pack is right now, and you can see that in the top right corner of your screen in the fact that we do have P1 all the way through to what is P17 only separated by the best part of 30 seconds, if that, 28.2 to be a bit more precise. Well, that does mean going into the pits right now could be very punishing, and you may end up coming out in traffic and therefore losing time. So for Gretschel, it's not going to be about pitting, it's going to be about outlasting his rivals and forcing them to make the first strategic move, unless he suddenly discovers there is a window on which he can pit into. But that's going to be very hard to, unless he's got a spotter working for him. But we don't know that information, although you can imagine some of the drivers will have spotters out there, but as they may have to do it of their own mathematical calculations. But as our leaders make their way up towards 130R, we look back to the BMW M8 of Carlo Panzoldi, who we jump on board with, and we're coming into that left-hander in the number 12. Looking good right now as the number 19 driver, enjoying a good race as he chased after Marcel and Hernan, and we'll make his way through a left-hander and now onto that back stretch, and that wonderful roar of that BMW as he makes his way up towards the fast left-hander. Let's listen in. Having to do a bit of a lift there, particularly with the dirty air of Hernan's car in front, just to upsetting that front end, but that lovely raw German machinery. But hold up a second, ladies and gentlemen. We come back to the front of the field because there's been more battling in towards turns 1 and 2. And right now, Gretschel holding on again, but Lorenzo almost making the pass count that time around as they made the way in towards the opening corner. I think they were side by side as I look out my contact booth window, and we said about strategy occurring around the 17th to the 18th minute. And well, we do have Chambers and O'Neill both into the pit lane. They've got nothing to lose by pitting early and gambling on the undercuts. So they're going to go for it, and we get a quick replay of what was the fight between Lorenzo and Gretschel. And here we go. It was down towards turn number 1 at the start of the lap. They're currently on lap number 11, and well, holding to the inside as much as possible was Gretschel. Up contact. Oh my good lord, sparks flying between the two of them. Elbows out there. That was very close to curtains, but in the end managed to keep it alive. And right now, as we come on back, there's more fighting in towards Kobayashi hairpin. They go around the outside, tries Lorenzo, but Gretschel holds on as Alberto Fernandez tries to get involved as well. The gloves are coming off here in what is the midway point of this race, and Gretschel is under huge pressure. Lorenzo once again over the back of him, runs to the grass almost to the inside here into Spoon. There's elbows out between them, and Lorenzo goes sideways. He goes to the dive. It doesn't work out. It pushes him down to P4, and the number 1 driver right now is not in number 1 in position. He's in P4, and I can imagine Gretschel will be just thinking, well, I did everything right as far as I could. I made it hard for him, but not too hard, and Lorenzo clearly wanted to place more and more, but in the end I think getting a bit carried away. Then there's still plenty of race to go, and now it's going to be Fernandez and Cruz who have the opportunity to take on Gretschel first. But then again, will Samuel Lorenzo think about carving his way past them, or will he do something different? Will Lorenzo think, okay, if I can't do it via overtaking, surely I've got to do it on strategy? And the answer is at least not this time. And again, I think he's worried about the fact if he pits now, he's going to come out in traffic, and it's not traffic he can afford. But in the battle for P2, Fernandez and Cruz making the way together, but here comes Daniel Cruz looking up the inside of Fernandez into turn 1. 2 wide, they're going to the opening apex, and there's got to be space given there by Fernandez. He does so, and Cruz moves up into P2 there. Fernandez not offering too much of a fight, but to be fair, I think Walter Fernandez in the number 5 thinking one thing right now, which is we can't afford to lose the race leader, because he's had to work so hard to hold on to that lead. Therefore, he will be a little bit of tyre life disadvantage, or at least the tyres will be quite hot. And you can imagine now that for Cruz and Fernandez, they're almost working together. They've taken on, I think, the role of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is they'll work together all the way up to the final lap, and then the gloves will come off between the two of them. But meanwhile, Felix Gretschel just holding on, and I think doing everything in his power right now just to make sure these Corvettes do not find a way through. It's tense, it's tough, it's GT racing action. And whilst all this is going on, well, what about Simon Bamber with his charge through the field, having started all the way down in what was P17, I hear you ask? Well, he is currently 2.5 seconds off of Gustavo Culici, and is gradually closing, albeit not at the rate of knots that we perhaps expect given the way he's closed up to drivers previously. And to give you an idea of the lap time or the time delta in terms of the closure, there it is on your screen in the bottom right hand corner. You can see how that gap has come down over the last 5 laps from what was 4.4 seconds all the way down to 2.4. So on average there, if you do the quick mathematics over 5 laps, he has been stripping 4 tenths a lap out, and that is the sign of the pace we've seen over the last couple of laps in particular. Bamber is flying quite nicely, but the thing is, Culici as well is not here just to simply fall behind Bamber, and I think he'll do everything he can as he makes his way just out of the camera shot there, the bottom right corner of your screen. He will be very eager to try and prove to Bamber, look, you may be fast, but I can prove to be a little bit of a thorn in your side as I head in towards 130R. as they come on through the left-hander. We're looking back up towards the front of the field, and they make the way on past the pit lane entrance there as we clear the halfway point of this race. So therefore these fuel tanks now are getting quite light. The top four there head on down. It's the Porsche, the number 3 of Gretschel ahead of the Corvette Crusade of Cruz, Fernandez and Lorenzo. And as they make the way on through into turn number 1, we then have Jerome Valer, as we can see up the Belgian driver hitting the number 6 Porsche, trying to get a bit closer. 3 seconds of the leaders. His pace right now is matching Fernandez and Lorenzo, but not quite matching the top 2. So therefore Valer is going to be all about, if they start fighting up front, he may be able to get involved, but he's got to try and maintain his pace to do so. Otherwise he'll fall out of the window for being able to play a key role. And then in P6 it's Javier Alfonso Moreno, as we see there the wonderfully coloured with yellow and red Corvette C8R, and well, an absolutely boisterous livery there, but we love it as he makes his way for turn number 7, and the number 12 driver really enjoying a solid run here, albeit a bit of a quiet run, having started P6, and that's where he's been all day so far. Gustavo Calici, the Corvette driver there in P7, only at what is now 1.8 seconds ahead of Simon Bamba. As we see Bamba there in the rear of the camera shot, and as they come on through, we have Digit Boyce at P9 in the Ford GT. The Soul Ford GT here continuing its way, albeit 9 seconds off of Bamba now, but Boyce in a very comfortable 3-second advantage to Amaro, who you can see there in the rear of the picture, Jose Amaro, and then Besteros P11 is Marcello Hernan. You can see that in the all-black C8R, Riccardi Serdell P12 and trying to close up. And in fact, Serdell on the last couple of laps has been almost 1.5 seconds a lap faster than Hernan, and almost what is a second faster than Amaro. So I think Serdell right now absolutely enjoying the pace out there. And I think trying to now get this Porsche to come into what is its optimum window, and in finding it, well, I think he's going to be feeling quite positive at this point onwards, albeit we'll have to wait and see how it can all work out for him. But as the drivers make the way on through and he skips his way up through Spoon Corner, well, there's still plenty more to come here between the drivers, no doubt about it. And well, it was all going to be now about that pit stop and where it puts you out in the pack. As we look behind them, we see Oleg Poilov in P14 trying to chase after the Ferrari of Daniel Morato, and well, Moroto I should say, and in towards turn number 14, 14, they go in towards 130 as I get my numbers right eventually. And well, the BMW M8, the top of the BMWs right now, clear with the rest of it, Panzoldi and Novak being a 3 and 5 seconds behind it respectively. But Poilov here knows there's a bit more work to do if he wants to try and break into that top 10 before all is said and done. But to be fair, is to finish where he currently stands, given his door number 20, I think he'd be very happy with his performance. Some good places gained. Having started P20, he started on his door number, but we'll have to see what can come before all is said and done here at Suzuka. As meanwhile, looking back up towards the front of his quartet of drivers, will Gretschel ahead of Cruz and Fernandez, and Lorenzo now starting to settle down. I think Samuel Lorenzo, well, we have seen this in previous seasons, particularly last season. Many of you may remember, if I'm thinking of the correct driver, it was Lorenzo, I think, at Algarve, who in the end did try and carve his way through, but did find some drivers who proved to be a bit obstinate, and Lorenzo in the end having a difficult day at the office. If I've got the wrong driver, I do apologise in advance, but I think Lorenzo here, building from the experience of battling for Gretschel and deciding, okay, you know what, just fall into the pack, save the fuel, stay on the pace. You know you've got the pace to battle for the lead, and you know you can go for it, but is it really worth it if you know you've also got the option, the strategy to help you out? And I think that's what Lorenzo's now realises. It's not just going to come to him on circuit. He's going to have to find a way to get a bit smarter about this, rather than looking to get those elbows out, because these GTE machines, well, they can rub, they can bump, we've seen that, but they are sensitive, and if they're hit on what is the corners of the car, particularly around the suspension, the geometry can very quickly get damaged, and as a result, that can be a very quick trip to the pits, and one that you do not recover from until the very end of the race. As Lorenzo comes down in towards the braking zone, he can see as he goes very deep. In fact, it's a bit unsighted there for the braking zone, but doesn't lock up, just lets the brakes roll off there. So Lorenzo pushing it hard, really seeing where that pace is, but the more he's going to push, well, the harder this is going to get for him as they head on down the start finish straight. As Jerome Valer comes into the pit lane, as you look in the back left corner of your screen, but you can see it, Gretschel there defending versus Cruz, as Cruz now tries to take a peek here. 27 minutes complete. They are getting closer to the end of those fuel tanks, so I think Daniel Cruz now deciding to get a little bit feisty, a little bit bitey and fighty as well, and thinking, okay, this might be my opportunity to shine, as Vedler, also Boisier and Hernan all into the pit lane. Poilov as well, as I look out my commentary booth window, so pit stop season is getting underway. A lot of drivers choosing not to pit for the simple reason they don't want to come out into traffic, but where does Jerome Vedler come out, I hear you ask? Well, let's look to him as he leaves the pit lane. And he comes out here in what would be P12, albeit keeping in mind he has had a number of drivers around him coming to the pits or drivers behind him. So therefore, I would imagine that for Vettel, it's going to be a situation whereby this isn't the most ideal indicator of where you would come out if you're one of the top 4 who decided to pit. But at least it shows you he's bought himself some clear space with everyone else opting to pit now. And that clear space is going to enable him to pump in some good lap times here, so long as he makes sure to get that tyre back up to temperature gradually on this out lap. Albeit it doesn't take as long given the fact he's been on this tyre since the start, but it does lose temperature when you're stationary in the pits, even if it is, in his case, only for 13 seconds, or 12.98 to be a bit more precise, to put that fuel in. But the key point being here is he has to nurse that tyre back up to temperature, and then he can go full attack once again and start to deliver those consistently fast laps. As he looks to chase down Carlo Panzoldi, what is the last of our drivers in the pack who's yet to pit. He's running P11, but when he pits, he will go further down the order, we most likely suspect. And while the BMW M8 driver 9, there's still work to be done here. And well, as the clouds come over the Suzuka circuit, it's looking to be a little bit of a cloudy end to the race, albeit no rain in the cards at all. Rain not available currently. 2 is the GT class on iRacing, and I suspect it will come one day, but not currently today. And well, into the pit lane comes Gretschel. He decides to come in. Now, this is intriguing. We've not seen this in the best part of what has been 12 or so weeks of racing we have covered so far in the GTE series, where the leader has pitted before or at the same time as the pack behind him. And you can see Borja Fernandez and Sammy Lorenzo both coming in as well, so they've all decided to make their way into the box, and this is going to be close between them. Daniel Cruz and also Javier Alfonso Moreno decide to stay out there, but let's wait and see here. It's going to go a bit quiet, but this is going to be the race on who's going to get the fuel gun on and who's going to get back out there. And Gretschel with a very quick pit stop, 11.5 seconds stationary. Meanwhile, Sammy Lorenzo and Borja Fernandez battling side by side up the pit lane. Lorenzo is going to just sneak ahead slightly. Remember, they have to respect the white exit line there. They cannot go across it, otherwise they will get an automated penalty for breaching the pit line perimeter. And will Sammy Lorenzo jumps ahead of Fernandez on strategy by the smallest of margins there in the pit lane. Albeit Fernandez had a slower stop in terms of the overall end-to-end pit time, but was faster with regards to his static time. He was almost a second faster. Fernandez only 11 seconds stationary, and that'll show you how much fuel saving he's done. Lorenzo 11.8, but the reverse being Lorenzo was quicker into his box and he was quicker out of it on the reactions, and that is what's made the difference, enabled Lorenzo to jump ahead of Fernandez. And will Gretschel, meanwhile, well, he's gained a bit of time. There were the two of them fighting on that pit lane exit, but I can imagine those gains will be marginal, and with 15 minutes to go, those gains are going to very quickly disappear. But speaking of disappearance, oh my good lord, what on earth has happened to Simon Bamber's car? It's missing the front bumper there, unless I'm mistaken. Well, that is not normal for what is that car, and was makes wound through. I haven't got anything to say exactly what's happened there to number 4 driver, or any information to suggest as to why that front bumper is hanging loose on the car. And there is, he runs wide, but you can definitely feel what is the impact of that damage to the car. And as he makes his way onwards there, it looks as though that front bumper is having some issues. And will Gustavo Calici right now making his way on around here, overtakes Simon Bamber. And it does seem as though, well, for Bamber, it is all going the wrong way. And, well, it's going backwards rather than forwards at this point in the day. But as the drivers come in towards what will be at the back stretch, well, we've got the rest of the leaders now pitting. And Daniel Cruz comes to his stationary stop there. And, well, you could also see in the rear of the picture, that's Javier Alfonso Moreno, who's also making his pit stop. But as they get served, all meanwhile, Gretschel will surely retake the lead this race, or at least in theory, as Cruz is leaving the pit lane already. Where's he going to come out here? There's Cruz. Where's Gretschel? Well, where is Gretschel? I hear you ask. There he is. And it is Daniel Cruz who takes the lead. Cruz goes to the overcut here, and it works out. And what a strategic move from Daniel Cruz. Decides to go a bit longer, and I think he must have known, much like Fernandez, he'd done enough fuel saving. And right now, Gretschel is going to try and find his way through, but he will have this lap to go on the attack as we ride on board here in the car with the number 3 driver of Gretschel, and he'll know by the end of this lap that Cruz will have all of what will be the heat in his tyres to go racing once again. But Gretschel will be worried about the fact that if he can't get this move done soon, Lorenzo is only 1.1 seconds by it and is gradually closing. So therefore it really is, if he can get past Cruz, he buys himself time. If he can't, however, we might see a battle for P2 really explode on top screens quickly, and it will be Daniel Cruz who's just able to run off into the distance and potentially put this race to bed without issue. Onto the brakes they go in towards Kobayashi hairpin, and as they do, we can see Cruz already now starting to settle in a little bit more as he's made his way halfway through the lap, looking quite comfortable there as they head up towards what will be Spoon Corner, and we'll roaring their way on through. This Porsche not closing at the moment, and we'll get to see really for the first time Crutchlow having to run in the dirty air of another car. Has he got a car that's set up just to run in clear air and really be the lead car of the pack, or is there going to be some room in this operating window to be able to run in the dirty air? Well, maintaining the gap there to Cruz so far, not really gaining, not really losing, so it does seem as though these two drivers evenly matched at this time, but you can imagine as we go a couple of laps later, that's when we'll start to see the indicators as to whether that Porsche has got anything in it, and or at least its driver's got anything where they can absolutely make that gap become smaller and smaller and eventually look for that move. But of course we still have 12 minutes and the final lap to contend with here, and with lap times being just shy of 2 minutes for these drivers, 1 minute 54s for what was the best laps earlier on, but we are now starting to see those lap times dip into the 155s. We can imagine we've got plenty of laps to be turned. It'll be 7 laps if my maths is correct, including the one they've just gone on to, and therefore this race is not over by any means. Meanwhile, looking a little bit further back, we have had a change of position between what is Matty Chambers and Cedric Boissier for P9, and I believe Boissier's gone on. He's rejoined, however. He's taken a very, very long route. In fact, he's taken what is the sensible recovery route there through the alternative chicane. But what exactly led to Boissier losing the place to Matty Chambers in the first place? Well, here's the replay to explain. And well, this was the run down towards turn 1. Chambers onto the inside then, got the overspeed, and Boissier trying to hold the outside line there, being fully committed, and side by side all the way through turn number 2. But in the end, there's only one way through, and it's the way that Matty Chambers took on the inside in order to move up to P9. Classic move there, lovely racing between the two of them. And we will now return to your live racing as Boissier does have Jose Amaro chasing after him. Afterwards, that mistake that Boissier made at Casio Triangle on the previous lap, well, therefore that's cost him time, and it's going to put him under pressure as they come through turn number 7 and onto the rise all the way around towards Degner 1, and as they make their way into the two fast right-handers here, with Degner 1 being that corner where you can take the apex curve, as Boissier demonstrates there, but in doing so you've got to have a car set up on its suspension to do so, otherwise the car will be ejected out a huge amount of understeer onto what will be the exit curve and beyond into the gravel trap. But Boissier feeling comfortable with the way this Ford GT is running, and we look back from the rear of Wes number 8 car as it is building a queue of cars behind it. That's the Mara and Serdal both closing up here and catching quite nicely in the Corvette and the Porsche respectively. So 3 manufacturers fighting for the final spot inside the top 10, and well, this is the one car that bucks the trend of there being Porsches and Corvettes in the top 10. It's the only one outside those 2 manufacturers, and Boissier doing everything in his power right now to make sure they don't put themselves in to that top 10 slot, and he keeps that variety just a little bit longer as he powers his way out of that Spoon Corner onto the backstretch in the EcoBoost machine. Well, right now, can Amaro find a way to get a bit closer? He can see the speed is building, and in fact, look how quickly that Corvette is closing in the slipstream now. I mean, the slipstream is an element in itself, but I would imagine Amaro's perhaps running a little bit less rear wing compared to Boissier, or the gearing has been adjusted on that Corvette, really to give it an upper hand going on through the long stretches, because that was absolutely monstrous as Bamber's into the pit lane, I believe, for repair work on the Corvette of his own afterwards. A front bump hanging loose. We're not quite sure how that's happened. I suspect it's where he's impacted on a curb and having a very low ride height on the front of the car. But here's a peek from Amaro. You can see it's in the final phase of acceleration on the straights when he's getting into 5th and 6th gear. That is where Amaro just suddenly finds so much speed at the last minute compared to this Ford GT, and well, that is a surprise, and for Boissier not a welcome one to be certain, but for Amaro I think right now it feels like if he can just get a little bit closer on initial corner exit, he may be able to lunge his way all the way into that position. But of course now they're fighting for P9 with Bamber having to come to the pit lane for that repair work, so that means that there's a little bit more pressure on here, because there's even higher position up for grabs depending on who's able to hold on to it all the way to the very end. And behind that, Carly Serdell just watching this, and I think thinking the plan of, well, you know what, if I let them fight as we ride on board here with a P11 driver, if I let them fight for long enough, I might just be able to gain both places rather than think about having to just pick one off at a time as he heads in towards turns 10 and 11. But you can definitely see holding back here, Serdell. A little bit run deep there from Amaro. Collects the car just about, but some oversteer there as he made his way off of the Kobayashi hairpin apex. And what Amaro, I think, just pushing a bit too hard there. He wants to get close to the boys here. He knows he can, but there's that understanding of a bit of frustration, the fact that once you get within 3 attempts, you need more. He's not quite able to get close enough. I think he feels though he's close enough to get the job done, and then he's faced the reality he isn't close enough to get the job done, and then you've got to try and break down that wall, which is a further 10th But that's the hardest part, because of course the closer you get, the more prominent that dirty air becomes off your rival, and also the greater the risk of overheating the front tyres and the front brakes by running into that dirty air off of the car in front of you. As we can see, Amaro runs wide, has to straighten the steering wheel there as always he bounced off the exit curb, but he's going to look to the inside, and well, that is a very brave move there, straight away coming off of the rejoin to look for the move, and Boise in the end gives him the space to operate. I think there might have also been some dirt on the tyres, which led to Amaro running deep under braking, so Boise have been very aware, some great awareness of the Ford GT driver, but it has enabled Amaro to get close. Amaro's going to look for the move here, he's going to use it to his advantage, and they come into turn number 1, but Boise says, okay, I'll give you the minimum room allotted into turn 1, and if you commit to it, we're both going off, and Boise getting his elbows out there, and the Ford GT driver right now trying to hold on to dear life for what is another 7 minutes plus a couple more laps as they make the way up through the SS sequence. But look at how close Amaro is here as they come on through where it's turns 3, 4, 5, and then into 6. They descend down through the right-hander, and then the fact that right now Boise are absolutely being forced to give it everything in this Ford GT. A bit further back you do have the BMW of Oleg Poilov trying to make its way past Marcello Hernan's Corvette, and they are only a second off of Daniel Moroto, who in turn is a second off of what is the car of Sir Dels. They're all close together right now, and all this batting is bringing them all together to make what is a 6-way fight for the final 2 spots in the top 10. But here we go, Poilov on the inside to outside into turn 11, Hernan on the inside there as they make the way through the low-speed hairpin, and will that BMW, we know it's not as good traction coming out of low-speed corners, but it's got a lot of straight line speed, and here comes Poilov then through 12 on the inside to go to the outside of Spoon Corner. Hernan's going to stay there as they make the way in towards the braking zone. He's not going to give up in that Corvette, but neither is Poilov, but he's got the weaker brakes, he cuts back, he goes for it, there's no contact between the two, bit of a look up there as Hernan slams the door in his face. I think Poilov there was hoping that Hernan would have seen it coming and given the space to operate, but Hernan says no, and now it's a drag race down the back stretch here. Brilliant battling between the two of them as they head in towards Spoon Corner. It's going to be too wide all the way, and will Hernan commit all the way around the outside? He's going to have to, but in the end Poilov simply sticks himself right on the inside there and says, right, I'm getting this done. Hernan's flashing his lights, he's not happy about it, but what a move there from Poilov in the end, absolutely going all in for it in the number 20. He had to be forceful, but it's brilliant racing between the two of them. I think they'll reflect on that quite fondly. But looking at from them to a bit further down the order, do at Bevers, as we do see the Ferrari driver chasing after Nick O'Neill, and I believe right now Bevers just trying to find a way to get into P17 between these two, as we have had an unfortunate retirement for Simon Bamber. I've just had whispered in my ear the Corvette driver having more difficulty with the car after the repair work, and therefore I believe they've decided to retire the car after what's been a challenging day for Bamber. But meanwhile, I'm sure we'll see him in future weeks of racing here in the GTE Sprint Series. But we see Bevers trying to chase down the BMW of O'Neill, but no way through at the moment. The battle between the BMW and the Ferrari, and even though they might be fighting towards the back of the pack, it's always great to see the fighting between the two of them here. They're having good fun out there, and we do love to see it as they roar their way in towards turns 6 and 7. But coming around, and we'll keep our eyes on this battle in the background. It looks like the Ferrari there's able to get close, but not quite close enough. Well, Marcello Hernan has had a big off track, and in fact has promoted him all the way down the order to what is P14. So from what was, well, in fact, no, not an off-track. I apologise. I'm getting confused with Jose Amaro. I thought he'd had an off-track. He has had an off-track a little bit earlier on, but he hasn't lost any places, has Jose Amaro. And there, as you can see, he hasn't lost P10 at the moment, but getting confused by two Corvettes, as we do see the lead of those two Corvettes making its way into a spoon curve, but still in P10. For a left-hander they go, and down towards what will be the back stretch. But the number 17 Corvette, as much as it huffs and puffs right now, he hasn't been able to find a way to blow down the resilient walls of Cedric Boissier, as that Ford GT again, it just doesn't have the straight line speed compared to that Corvette, and I suspect it's the way they've set up the car for this race. But you can imagine that Boissier right now would be hoping he'd just have a couple more miles an hour on these straights, because it's so vulnerable at the end of them. Thankfully the straights are not as long as I think the Corvette driver would design them to be, because otherwise Jose Amaro would be roaring on past. They're just short enough, these straights, to give the Ford GT breathing room on traction out of the corner to open the gap up, and the gap doesn't quite condense down by the point of what is that braking zone. But looking back here to a move being made for P17 by Bivers versus O'Neill, it's going to be too wide through Casio Triangle, and the number 10 BMW still there on the outside as they come through 17. A little bit of wobble there on power, trying to deploy the best part of 550 horsepower as they make the way down towards turn 1. He's on the right, it's the BMW of Nick O'Neill. On the left is Bivers in the Ferrari, and as they come in towards turn 1, the mist descends, but it's not red, it's grey, and as they make the way into the braking zone, Bivers gets to the inside and moves into P17. The Ferrari gains a place, and the BMW will now have to try and come back that in the closing stage of the race. But I think Bevers might just be able to break away, or will he be able to? We'll have to see as we look back from the rear of what is the number 15. And right now that BMW is looking absolutely ferocious behind. It's not just the grille or the lights that give it that menacing look, but the MA absolutely on the attack. But Bevers trying to hold on. Oh my good lord, a big slide that comes through turn 70. You can tell those the tyres on this Ferrari are definitely past their prime. And as we said earlier, the tyres are the biggest weakness on the Ferrari. It has a very specific operating window on its tyres. And as soon as you creep out of that window, you will know it in the fact this car goes from being an absolute angel to being the devil itself. But as they head in towards 10 and 11, Bevers right now just holding the middle of the road and making Nick O'Neill have to try and find a bit of an inventive way to come on through. But a great fight between the two, and they stay as they were for the time being after the Belgian driver made that pass. Look, in fact, the Dutch driver should say from the Benelux region. But meanwhile, as we make our way back up towards your leader, and here's Daniel Cruz, who right now 1.4 seconds clear. He has opened that gap up little by little over the last couple of laps over Felix Gretschel, and Gretschel now started to contend with fast approaching Samuel Lorenzo, who really has played the game of just waiting and watching in the wings for what has been the last 4 laps. He hasn't really made a threat so far, but I can imagine Lorenzo now seeing that Gretschel has fallen away from the leader. The Porsche driver just doesn't seem to quite have the pace to match Cruz, therefore he's feeding it as though he can go on the attack. If Lorenzo has got the tyre life to be able to do so, remember their battle, and remember Lorenzo had to push very hard in order to look for an opportunity that may have taken all the life he had in the compound, and if so, it means that he's really trying to just put some distant pressure on Gretschel to get him to fall off of the running order. But that's the hard part as well, because Gretschel has really managed this race, as we see a little bit of power oversteer there from Lorenzo. And the one thing we have heard down the paddock in recent weeks, particularly from Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, is that the Corvette does struggle compared to the Porsche in getting the power down out of low-speed corners or hairpins by comparison, and that is why we did see so many Porsche drives at Daytona, and we're seeing there the differences between the two cars over the course of the lap at Suzuka. When the medium-speed corners, the Corvette is able to match the Porsche, if not surpass it, but meanwhile on low-speed corners, the Porsche is an element of its own. Heading up the back straight and towards what will be 130R, will the headlights stand prominent. All those cars, they roar the way through a left-hander, and they get ready to go on to their final lap of racing here at Suzuka today. It's not long to go. It'll be another 2 minutes of racing, and it will come the end of it. That checker flag will wave, and will it be Cruz, will it be Gretschel, or will it be Lorenzo who are crowned our winner here in week number 3 of the series? Well, we will see, as meanwhile we do look back to what is a growing battle here for P10 between Jose Amaro and Carly Serdell, with Cedric Boisier really leaving these two behind now by a second. It doesn't sound like much, but it'll feel like an eternity for them as they try to clamber hand over fist in order to go on the offensive. Further behind, Oleg Poilov looking on Daniel Moroto. Moroto there worried about the BMW coming. No, he does not. He holds his race line, knowing that BMW is too far away in order to be able to look for an opportunity to attack. So therefore, they'll stay as they were as they head towards the braking zone. No change between them. Bevers and O'Neill, they're getting close again, and this is a P17 by the last running positions, and Bevers just holding his line as the BMW stays close but not able to look for an opportunity. Albeit I think O'Neill's going to try and carry all the speed here, and it's going to be Bevers who goes defensive in the middle of the road. O'Neill looks around the outside, but in the end a lock up on the front right brake, and the BMW just can't quite get it stopped in time in order to make that move happen and make the magic happen with it. So therefore, as we look from the back of the field to the very front of it, that's where we're going to stay now. Daniel Cruz 2 seconds clear. Felix Gretschel meanwhile still holding on to P2 in the number 3 for a little bit longer at least, as Samuel Lorenzo within half a second, but he's not been able to whittle that gap down any further. And Lorenzo here is throwing everything at this as we ride on board with the P3 driver and taking a few stone chip-ins there. Carries a lot of speed, runs out wide. If he's throwing everything at this now and saying, right, it's the last lap of the tyres, I might as well give it my all. But I don't think the number 1 driver here is going to be able to bring it home in P1 or P2 unless Gretschel makes a major error as they power the way down the back straight. You can see there the gap 3/10 and close, and he's in the tow. How much speed can he carry here in towards 130R? He has to back off a little bit given the dirty air, and that's going to be the difference. They head in towards the braking zone. He's going to go live for it. Gretschel in the end just covers him off, but meanwhile the checker flag waves, and come the end of 45 minutes of racing, Daniel Cruz masters it on strategy today and is your winner in a superb drive at Suzuka. He takes victory by 2.3 seconds in over Felix Gretschel, who finishes P2 in the Porsche, and then it will be another Corvette on the podium for Samuel Lorenzo, who finishes P3 there. It will then be 5.6 seconds to what will be Balta Fernandez, who takes P4 ahead of Jorona Vadled, who had a quiet but successful race to P5. Then it'll be Javier Alfonso Moreno, P6 in the Corvette. And then we do have what is 7 seconds to Gustavo Calici. Another solid race, a very quiet race for the Argentine driver. But to be fair, sometimes quiet races are what they're all about. He finishes as per his door number, P7. Matty Chambers now makes his way on down towards the timeline and takes a P8-9 that there's plenty more places on the line today, but unfortunately troubles at turn 1 when battling cost him dear. The Ford GT Sprint Boycia holds on to P9, just keeping Jose Amaro and Carsi Serdell behind. Amaro will take P10. He's absolutely ecstatic about that one. You can see the flash of the headlights. Best SP11 was Serdell, and then it'll be Oleg Poilov at P12 ahead of Daniel Moroto, and then we will have what will be Marcello Hernan P14 ahead of Carlo Panzoldi, who takes P15, and in the battle 4P16 it'll be Marty Novak ahead of Joat Bevers, who just finishes ahead of Nick O'Neill in the end. Nick O'Neill tried to come back on the final lap but couldn't quite do so, and then Daniel Zink will be 19th last but not least in the 7-Up BMW M8. What a race, ladies and gentlemen. Suzuka absolutely delivered, and well, I can definitely tell you that livery is making me want to have a can of 7-Up, no doubt about it. I'm not being sponsored to say that, I promise you, but I must admit that I am getting a little bit thirsty, and well, our thirst for GT race action has definitely been sated, but a good cup of tea for me will be the absolutely brilliant one to soothe my throat after covering such frantic action for 45 minutes. But with that, let's take a look at those race results subject to Eddie Stewart's inquiries, and here they are for week number 3 in our top split broadcast here for the 2025 Season 2 campaign at Suzuka. And after 45 minutes, a brilliant piece of strategic work and really led to Daniel Cruz leapfrogging his way into the lead, and he never looked back there and took victory by 2.3 seconds over Felix Gretschel. A solid performance there from the number 3 driver in his first top split broadcast debut, in the fact finishing P2, fighting hard every step of the way and keeping Samuel Lorenzo at bay, who in the end had to settle for P3, and definitely a challenging race for the Spaniard, but knowing they had to fight incredibly hard, and that P3 will feel hard earned at that. Balta Fernandez was P4, fell off the pace after the pit stop, but still I think settling for a 4th place, and he'll be happy with that in the number 5 ahead of Jeroen Vatled, the Belgian driver there for Simworld GT Racing. And taking a confident at P5 and really didn't have the pace to match the top 4, but he had the pace to be the better of the field, and that P5 really represents where he stood today. And then Javier Alfonso Moreno, P6 there, and a quiet race himself in the number 12. His consistency rewarded him ahead of Gustavo Calici, the Argentine, taking P7 there, and will start in where he wanted to finish with regards to his door number and also his qualifying position. Matty Chambers, P8 Evo SR Green driver, really threw everything today, did the Briton in the Porsche 911 RSR. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't, particularly at turn 1 where the rear of the car seemingly did not have the grip available, but still Chambers put on an absolutely ecstatic performance. Head of Cedric Boycia, the Ford GT driver for Cube Racing, holding on, and in the end the Frenchman being rewarded with a P9 finish and one of the hardest fought P9s that I suspect of his iRacing career. Jose Amaro, P10 there, holding on to a top 10 finish just ahead of Carsi Serdell in their brilliant battle towards the end of the race, and Serdell finishing best the rest. And it was Oleg Poilov who fought his way up the field very gradually from a P20 start to finish P12, and credit where it's due to the BMW M8 driver, he really was one of the hidden stars of today's show, in the fact making his way out those places and having to work very hard to do so. Daniel Moroto at P13 there, the Ferrari driver, also putting in a solid performance, finishing ahead of Marcello Hernan despite their battles midway through the race. And then Carlo Panzoldi completed your top 15, ahead of Marty Novak with Joat Bevers, Daniel Zink, and then Nick O'Neill finishing off your running order there. And I believe there's been a post-race penalty applied to Nick O'Neill's race time, and that's promoted Zink up into P18. And then from was our finishers, 2 our retirees, unfortunately 2 retirees today, and they did include Simon Bamber with the front bumper coming off of the Effect Simulations Corvette C8R right towards the end of the race, and then Rico Grand, who couldn't get the car out into qualifying, and those troubles continued to plague the driver going into the grid procedure. So in the end, what was 20 starters this race, 21 classified drivers, but only 20 starters, and a grand total 19 finishers, all of them on the lead lap, and what a race, no doubt about it. But in the end, Daniel Cruz was the man who launched his way to victory, and did so all through strategy here at Suzuka. But as the circuit falls silent and the clouds come over the Suzuka circuit fall, the mist descends. Well, it's the perfect time for us, ladies and gentlemen, to begin looking to wrap up. But of course, the question is, well, what lies in store in a week's time? Because this has been week 3 of the iRacing GTE Sprint Series, the official series on the Premier Sim Racing platform. But in week number 4, well, we couldn't head to anywhere better, could we? We head to the Italian Temple of Speed that is the Monza Grand Prix circuit. And of course, keep in mind, set your clocks and your calendars slightly differently because we won't be able to cover our regular Friday slot at 1900 GMT or UTC. That's 1900 Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Coordinate Time. But instead, we will be moving the broadcast to Wednesday, the 9th of April 2025. So we will see some different drivers on the grid most likely. It will only be 2 days into it, transitioning into week 4 of the series, and therefore we could completely mix things up in a different slot. But the one thing that will stay the same is the time we cover on that day, and it will still be the 1900 GMT and UTC slot, and we will see you there, ladies and gentlemen, for week number 4. Until then, we have been the GTE Sprint Series on iRacing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain's Pit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, we'll firstly have a fantastic weekend ahead. Remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.